Good afternoon and welcome to this webinar on little known ShareScope features. This afternoon I'm going to go through a list of various features that we feel that customers don't really know about. My name is Richard Chiesa and I am responsible for training here at Ionic. So if we move over to ShareScope, I'm starting off with a list. Now, the vast majority of the tips and tricks I'm going to show you today are applicable to ShareScope Gold, ShareScope Plus, and ShareScope Pro. There will be a couple that are only applicable to ShareScope Plus and Pro, but I will let you know when we get to those. So I'm going to start off with a list, and I am going to look at sorting. So as you probably know, when you want to sort a list, all you need to do is simply double click on the heading of a column that you wish to use to sort. So if I double click on the name column heading, the list will be sorted alphabetically, and if I double click on the percentage change column, the list will be sorted by percentage change. Sometimes you might want to sort a list by a secondary column. So for example, if I double click on broker consensus, the list will be sorted by broker consensus. However, all the buys are by default then sorted alphabetically. If I now go and add a sector, subsector, supersector, and industry column, I can sort by industry and I'll have all the basic materials. However, the list is not then going to be sorted by supersector, sector, and subsector. So if you wish to use supersector as your secondary sorting, just hold down the control key on your keyboard and double click. Now it will first sort everything by industry, then everything in the industry column that has the same value, so basic materials, will then be sorted secondarily by supersector. So first basic resources, then chemicals. Now you can have up to 4 columns determine the sorting. So if I hold down the control key and double click on the sector column, all the columns within the supersector, all the values within the supersector column that have the same item, so basic resources, will then subsequently be sorted by the sector. So first forestry and paper, then industrial metals and mining, then mining. And lastly, if I hold down the control key, I double click on subsector, everything that has the same value within the sector column will be then subsequently sorted by subsector. And you can tell which one is which. The main column being used for the sorting is will have a black arrow. Then you will see an empty arrow of the same size and 2 smaller arrows for the tertiary and quaternary sorting. If you then simply double click on another column, it will undo everything we've done and just do a normal sort by the selected column. Now, as we are on a list, I want to move on to the second tip that I want to talk about, and that is column filtering. We discovered that not many people actually noticed when we added this feature. If you can pick any column in a list, like say for example forecast yield, right click on it, and you will see there's an option here called Add Column Filter. Click on it, a box will open up, and it will allow you to set a range of values. So say for example, I want to look for, I want to filter this list by shares that have a forecast yield of at least 4%. I tick that I want to enter a minimum value, and I put 4 in the box. Now ShareScope will color the heading of a column to indicate that I have filtered by that column, and we now have only shares within the FTSE 350 list that have a forecast dividend yield of 4% or more. You can also set a maximum. So if I right click again and go to edit column filter, I can say, okay, I want to ignore all the ones that have a dividend yield of, say, above 9%, because that's possibly because the share price has fallen. So I'll click on OK, and now I have a minimum and a maximum. And if you can't remember which one you set up, just hover over the column heading and a little tooltip will tell you what you've set up in your filter. You noticed probably there's a third option, and that is the to limit the list to a specific number of items. So I want to only among the shares that have a dividend yield of between 4 and 9%, I only want to show the highest 20 or the lowest 20. So even if the shares that have a dividend yield between 4 and 9% are make up 20% of a FTSE 350, so it's 50 shares, for example, the little tick box there will allow you to limit to only the top or only the bottom 20 in that list. If you uncheck the tick box here and click on OK, the filter will be disabled. Right click again, go to enable column filter, and the filter will reactivate. Now, let's turn this back off. You can filter by multiple columns, so you could filter by yield, P, or any column that you have on your table. The only columns that you can't filter on are live columns, so you won't be able to apply a filter on, say, the mid-price percentage change, and that is because the prices are continuously changing, and we noticed it made the filtering process extremely slow if a value continuously changed. However, you can apply a filter to a text-based column. For example, if you want to filter out certain sectors, you can do that. You right-click on the column heading, go to Add Column Filter, and here a box will open up with a list of all the sectors. I can select untick all, and I only want to show aerospace companies, chemical companies, and mining companies, and oil companies. And so now we can see that our FTSE 350 list is filtered by sector and by dividend yield, and you can easily tell by the colors of the heading here at the top. You should have on your toolbar at the top a icon called Disable Column Filter or Enable Column Filter, and if you press it, it will switch off all the filters that you have on that column. If you press it again, it'll turn them all on again. If you don't have this icon on your toolbar, you can add it by right-clicking on the toolbar, selecting Customize Toolbars, and under the Buttons tab, on this list here on the left, search for Enable Column Filters, and you can just type in Enable here. So actually let me remove it so I can show you how to do that. So I will type in Enable. I have Enable Column Filters. I can then press the single right pointing arrow and the item will be added. If you don't like where it appears, you can use the up and down arrow keys here on the right to shift the button on the toolbar. When you're done, click on OK. Now you should have your button here, Enable and Disable Column Filters. One last thing before we move on, I wanted to show you filtering on a generic text column. if I right click on the name column heading and select add column filter, I can do a text search within that column. So say I want to search for any instrument that has the word gold in it. And I click on OK. Now, of course, there aren't any in the FTSE 350, but if we change the list to the entire London Stock Exchange, here we have it. We have every instrument that has the word gold in it. Now, probably with shares, it's not particularly interesting, but if you are looking at a list of funds or ETFs, and you are looking for a specific type of investment, but it doesn't necessarily have a sector classification, like, for example, gold-based funds or ETFs, you can do an easy way is to apply a filter to the name. You just search for gold, and everything that has the word gold in its name will appear in the list. Now we'll disable, and we're back to the full list. Now, we're still on a list, so let's continue on a list. As you probably know, in ShareScope you can build portfolios, and portfolios are just simply lists of shares that you build and manage yourself. You can add items and remove items. They won't change automatically, so if a share gets delisted, for example, but it will still stay in your portfolio. Now, we have created a feature called custom lists. This allows you to create lists that are based on other lists. Let's say, for example, that you would like to have the FTSE 350 list of shares with the FTSE 350 index added among them. Now, you could build a portfolio and add the 350 shares to the portfolio and add the index. Problem is, if a share drops out of a FTSE 350, it's not going to drop out of your portfolio. Custom lists will get around this. So to build a custom list, you go to View, Change List, and you'll see at the bottom there's an option for custom lists. If you've created any, they'll appear here in the list. If not, you just click on Create/Edit Custom Lists. So we click on it. And again, here, if you want to edit one of your existing ones, they'll appear here. Now my list is blank. And here we choose what items we want to add to our custom lists. So I want to choose a fixed list, and I'm going to go and pick the FTSE 350, and I'm going to include that. I don't want to make any limitation on any sector, but you can if you want. So if you want to always only show shares of a particular sector. And I also want to include a share. By share, ShareScope just means instrument, so it can be anything. I'm going to include, and I'm going to search for FTSE 350. Click on OK. And so now my custom list is made up of the FTSE 350 list plus the FTSE 350 index. And if the FTSE 350 list changes, so will your custom list. So I will then click on OK, and I'm just going to call this 350 plus index. And you can also add a toolbar button automatically for it, so it'll appear on your toolbar at the top. I won't do that right now. I'll click on OK, and now I can access this at any time by either pressing the toolbar button if you've added it, if not, under Change List, Custom Lists, and here it is, 350 plus index. And here it is, 350 plus index. It's the FTSE 350. Plus the FTSE 350 index. And doing things like this is quite useful because you can see how a share is performing compared to the index. So I can see, lost it again. Let's search for it. There we go. So I can now see that all the shares above here are performing better today than the index itself, and everything below this is performing worse than the index itself. Now, before we move on to things like graphs, I have a couple more things to show you pertaining lists. Actually, 3 more things. I apologize. Now, first is the company sector analysis feature. If we go back to the normal FTSE 350 list, right-click anywhere on a list, and you'll see an option called Company/Sector Analysis. Click on it, and a window will open up. This will allow you to analyze the list that you're looking at, and this can be any list. It could be the FTSE 350, it could be one of your portfolios, the entire London Stock Exchange. It's entirely up to you. And you can see what its makeup is, either by industry, by supersector, or sector, or subsector. And the pie chart that you see here is the total market capitalization of the entire list that you're viewing. So this is a total, the entire pie chart is a total market capitalization of the FTSE 350. And I can see, for example, that this big slice here is banks, and this big slice here is personal and household goods, and this larger slice here is industrial goods, and so on. You can also view this as a list. If you view it as a list, it will divide the list by supersector in this case, or you can just simply select sector. If I select sector, I'll see aerospace and defense. I'll see what the market capitalization of the aerospace and defense sector is within the FTSE 350, and I can see what percentage of the entire FTSE 350 that is. And then I can see that for the individual constituents of that sector. So I can see that, for example, banks makes £266 billion in market cap, and that adds up to 11.54% of the entire FTSE 350. And I can see that HSBC Holdings is 5.82% of the entire market capitalization of the whole of the FTSE 350. If you use this feature on a portfolio and you have transactions recorded in this portfolio, so you have purchases and sales, you can see you will be able to access this extra option you see here on the side, marked holdings. So instead of grouping the shares up by market capitalization and telling you what percentage of the total market capitalization they are, they'll look at the value of your holdings within the portfolio. So if you the portfolio is worth £100,000 and you a particular share that you have in the portfolio is £10,000, it will say £10,000, 10%, and that's 10 because it's 10% of the entire portfolio. And even when you have holdings, you can view this also as a chart, and it will and again, you can divide your portfolio by industry, supersector, subsectors, or even individual companies. So we can see the largest companies here, and here where it marks X is everything else. If the list goes down for too long, there's a more button, and it will show you the largest companies, and then everything else will be put under other. And you can apply this feature to any list whose constituents do have a either a market capitalization or in the case of a portfolio that you actually own them within the portfolio, so you've recorded purchases and sales within the portfolio. It won't work with, for example, a list of ETFs because there's no market capitalization for ETFs. It will work for ETFs if those ETFs are in your portfolio and you use the holdings function. Then it will look at those ETFs as their value within your portfolio as a percentage of the total value of your portfolio. And as we are talking about sectors, I would like to show my first feature that will only work with ShareScope Plus and Pro. So if you are a ShareScope Gold customer, please bear with me for 5 minutes while I show the Plus and Pro users how to do this. Now, when you're looking at a list of shares, you can sort it by sector and you can easily see which constituents of a FTSE 350 are part of the aerospace and defense sector, banks, etc. But there is another way that you can do this in ShareScope Plus and Pro. Now you'll need to create 2 separate windows. I am going to keep the list of FTSE 350 shares. And I'm going to add a list of FTSE 350 sector indices. Once you have the list of indices and the list of shares that you wish to look at, again, I've kept it on FTSE 350. It doesn't have to be the list of FTSE 350 shares. It could be the entire London Stock Exchange. I can right-click on the screen. I'll go to Select Sector, and I'll do show this sector only, non-life insurance. So if I click on this, it's going to limit the list to only shares of the chosen sector. Now you could go back, disable the feature, re-enable it on a different sector, but that's a bit tedious. Once you've limited it to a particular sector, you can right click on the bar here at the top and you'll see an option that says auto link to current sector. Click on it, and now the list will be linked to whichever sector you have happened to click on last. So if I click on automobile and parts, I'll only see automobile and parts shares. If I click on gas, water and multi-utilities, the same will happen. Once you've set this up, a nice thing to do will probably be to set up a chart. You can right click, new window, open up a historical graph, and right click on the heading and select auto link. And now you can choose what sector you want, and then you can choose which share you want within the sector. Additionally, you can add the sector index on overlaid on top of a chart. If let me limit the range to just a year so it makes it a little easier to see, and let's remove this moving average. Okay, if you then right click on the graph, you can go to additional graphs. Sorry, I modified the menu. I couldn't find the feature. And go to add or remove or edit additional graphs, and you can go add and go to share sector index. Choose a color, click on OK, and now I can see over the last year how the share has performed compared to the sector. I can then easily pick a different sector, maybe sort them by percentage change, and I can see the best and worst performing shares within that particular sector. I'm going to close these down and go back to showing the entire list once again. When you're building your own portfolios, or even just analyzing a list of a short list of results, maybe from a filter or a group of shares, and you want to quickly check what these how these shares have been performing as a group. Now, some cases, like if you're looking at FTSE 350, that's easy. There's an index for that. You just search for FTSE 350 index and you'll see exactly how those shares have been performing. When you have instead a list of shares that you've built, it becomes slightly more complicated. But there is a feature for that. Let's say I want to analyze how all the shares that have been marked as a buy by brokers have been performing as a group. Well, I select the first one, hold down the shift key, select the last one. I right click and I go to add the 22 selected shares to portfolio test. This is a portfolio I created earlier. So yes, and I now select my portfolio and here's my list of shares. There's a list of shares I have checked. Now, you could analyze the performance by using this portfolio as a dummy portfolio and record transactions in each share and see, set the purchase date maybe a year or two ago and see how the portfolio would have performed. But you can do this the quick and dirty way by right-clicking on the list, and you will see an option that will say Graph Shares here at bottom. And you can choose graph shares weighted by cap or not weighted by cap. If you do not weighted by cap, it's going to create a graph based upon just the price movements of the individual instruments. Each instrument will carry the exact same weight. Graph shares weighted by market cap, on the other hand, will build something a bit closer to what a FTSE 100 index is, or FTSE 350, which is a market cap weighted. But if we do not weighted, and click on OK, and here it is. The program will calculate the index, giving from a starting point an arbitrary value of 100, and it will start on the earliest start date among the list of instruments you've selected, and then it will average out the price movements, and you can see how those shares have performed. So this is what your hypothetical portfolio would look like if you had invested the same amount of money in all those shares starting on the 6th of January 1994. Of course, you can zoom in, and here I'm looking at the chart over the last year. From the starting point of here to an end point of there, you would have barely made less than 3%. Made less than 3% had you invested in these shares on the 1st of May last year. And this is just a very quick way of checking if a group of shares was good or bad. Obviously, this is a quick index that the program is calculating, so it won't include real life scenarios like trading costs and things like that. So probably that 2.5% profit that this index is marking will probably have been disappeared among costs. However, it is a very useful way of very quickly checking if a list of shares has been performing well or not as a whole. If you right click on the graph, you can then go to Return to Parent List, and it will return you back to the list you had built. Now, as we're talking about portfolios, a lot of people, a lot of users have multiple portfolios, and they might have even just multiple watch lists. They might have watch lists of, for example, broker recommendations. They have watch lists of things that they have discovered through analysis, and a watch list of shares that they have extracted via technical analysis. Now, if you are in a list, so for example FTSE 350, the program will always offer to add the share to the currently active portfolio. The active portfolio is simply the last portfolio that you're looking at. So if I click on a share in FTSE 350 and press Control A, or right click and click on the add selected share, it will add it to test. I have another portfolio called Test 2. If I'd like to add this share to Test 2, I have to go to add shares to another portfolio, select share, then select Test 2 and click on OK. Now, if you are going through long lists and want to add here, add there, depending on what you see, it can be a bit tedious. So there is an alternative. If you press the Select Portfolio button, select one of the portfolios and press the More button. The More button is where you get all the extra functions. So here is where you can copy a portfolio, rename it, delete it. And there's also a button called Add Key. What this does, you can create a add share to portfolio that is specific to this portfolio. If we click on available, I can see which key combinations are available and which ones are in use. So I'm going to use Control J, Control K, and Shift J, K, and L. So I will use Shift J and click on OK, and then I'm going to do the same to this one, and I'll select Shift K and OK, and I'll actually open this portfolio and clear it so we can see exactly what's going on. And let's clear both portfolios. So now I have associated the Shift J key combination to add a share to portfolio test, and Shift K to the test 2. So I can, for example, select 3i Group and press Control J, Aviva and BHP and press Control J, and then 888 Holdings and press Control K, Ashmore, press Control K, and BP, press Control K. And now if I select Test 2, 888, Ashmore and BP are on Test 2, and if we select Test 1, are the other 3. And this is useful if you are going through a list, like again FTSE 350 or any other list, and you sometimes want to put a share in one portfolio and sometimes in the other, and using a right-click menu can be a bit of a pain. But if you have these watch lists that you use all the time, attaching a keyboard shortcut to it, then that means you can select which portfolio at the touch of a key on your keyboard without having to go through the rigmarole of selecting the correct portfolio from the menu every single time you want to add a share to any given portfolio. Now I'm going to move away completely from portfolios and lists, and I am going to look at news. If I open up a news window, we can open up a full news window. If you double click on a story on a news window, the news window will open up and you can read the contents of the story. You've probably all done this. However, what you probably haven't noticed is that button here at the bottom called Display Options. Display Options allows you to edit the coloring conditions and the coloring options for certain keywords. Now, you can at the bottom here, you can edit the main font and background color. So the main text, as you can see, is just black on white, and the fixed width font and background color, which is this gray, these gray parts here. Again, that's black text on gray background. And company name, background color. When you select the company name, who's the main subject of a story, it will be highlighted this color. However, you can also set up two colors for different sets of keywords. So, for example, I'll do it picking up a word that is in this story, so we can immediately see. Let's say word portfolio. I type in portfolio and OK, and now any news story that has the word portfolio in it will be highlighted in green. Now, portfolio is just an example, not particularly useful example, but what people use this for is to set up a list of positive keywords in one box and a list of negative keywords in the second box. That way, if you open up a story, any positive keywords like for example above expectations or upgrade will be immediately stand out and be highlighted in whatever color you've picked here, and the negative keywords will be again stand out in the same way using the color that you've picked here. And you can add multiple words. So again, just to keep this news story as an example, if I have add the word nav and held, and here I add the word sold and close, and click on OK. Now the words portfolio, nav and held are highlighted in green, and in orange I have the words close and sold. If you made too many changes, what you can do is you can hit reset, and it will reset everything to its default values. There is another neat little option, which is color names of shares in a portfolio. So you have a portfolio, and you have maybe it's your actual investment portfolio, so the shares that you actually own, or it could be a portfolio of shares that you really want to keep an eye on. You can pick the portfolio from the list here, and anytime any of the shares in that portfolio is mentioned in a news story, even if a news story is not about that company, it's just mentioned in name, the name of a company is going to be highlighted in this color. So it's pale blue, and again, just click on the color to pick something a little bit more garish if you wish, and those will stand out. And this is just a way, especially if you are looking through a lot of news, because there is a lot of news. There's thousands of news stories that come through every day. So and you might only have the time to quickly glance through a particular story. Setting up these coloring setting up these color modes, which will just allow the important things, or things that you consider important, then to easily stand out. Now, let's move from news to graphs. Let's pick a graph of a heavily traded instrument, and let's remove the stuff that we added. Let's change it to a nice candlestick chart, and very quickly change this to just, there we go, black and white candlestick chart. There we go. There's now, first feature I want to show you, again, this is one of the Plus and Pro user only features, so again, bear with me, ShareScope Gold customers, but I really wanted to talk about this. Often in on the market there is one key competitor of against any given stock. Like for example, if you pick up GlaxoSmithKline, AstraZeneca is really the one and only big competitor within the same market. So you often want to check how Glaxo and AstraZeneca are doing compared to one another. You can do that easily using the pairs feature. So if you right click on a graph and go to add indicator, you will see there's a pairs indicator. Click on it, a box will open up. Here you can pair a share against another. So we can pair GlaxoSmithKline against AstraZeneca. AstraZeneca is not going to be paired up against anything else, it would just be against GlaxoSmithKline. So I can press select share and I can choose AstraZeneca and click on OK. And after you've paired the share with its competitor, for example, it doesn't have to be a competitor, you could pair the price of a gold mining stock against the price of gold, for example. You can pair any two instruments within the program. And you can display the comparison as either a ratio, where it will take the price of GlaxoSmithKline and divide it by the paired share, so just price of Glaxo divided by the price of AstraZeneca, or as a arithmetic difference, the price of Glaxo minus the price of AstraZeneca. You can edit the color of the style, you can add a moving average as well. But if we then click on OK, here we can see, and this is a good indication of how one share is performing against the other. We can see that the ratio was 0.269 back in July last year, and the ratio dropped. Now the ratio could drop either because the price of Glaxo fell or the price of AstraZeneca went up, but we can see that Glaxo has been performing worse than AstraZeneca over this period of time. Now if you add the pairs indicator and you move on to the next share, you'll see there is nothing on the graph because we have not paired Glencore with anything else. If we pick up BP, it's the same thing. If you want to now pair BP with, say, I don't know, Royal Dutch Shell, for example, you can double click on the title box. A box will open up, and you can now set what share you want to pair BP with. So I click on select share, and I'll pick Royal Dutch Shell. Now what I'll do this time is tick this option here. Use fallback when there is no specific pairing. So if there is no pairing, if you haven't paired the share, as you saw, the indicator would just go blank because there's no share selected. But what you could do is you can set up a default share against which any unpaired share gets measured against. So it'll default to the FTSE 100. I can tick this option to instead use the share sector index, or you can pick any instrument within the entire program to be the default pairing share. So if I click on OK, now I can see BP paired against Royal Dutch Shell, and again I can see the ratio of the two prices. So I can see that over the last few months it looks like BP has been performing slightly better than Royal Dutch Shell has, comparatively speaking. And if I move down to the next share in the list, now I have not paired Brewin Dolphin against any other share, so ShareScope picks the FTSE 100 by default. Now, staying on topic of the charts, there is one last thing I wanted to talk about, and then I'll take some questions before the webinar concludes. When you're testing out your sort of technical analysis skills, it can, if you're trying to discover if a particular, say, moving average pair works in your favor, it can be a bit hard to judge if you are able to see the future. So let's add a couple of moving averages on the chart. In lieu of example, I'll add a 20 period exponential moving average, make it slightly thicker so it's easier to see, and I will add a 50 period exponential moving average. I'll make this slightly darker. There we go. Now, in hindsight, it's easy to see that if you had taken a short position when these two moving averages crossed here, it would have gone really well for you, and it's so you could bias yourself towards thinking, oh, the 20 and the 50 period exponential moving average are great. Now, just as a disclaimer, I don't know if they're great or bad. I just picked two numbers at random here. But you can see, because I can see by looking at this cross here, I'm able to see several months into the future what happened after the cross. ShareScope has this feature called, under alternative modes, called training mode. So right click on the graph, go under and go alternative modes and training modes. If you're using ShareScope Gold, it won't say alternative modes, it will just say training mode on the main menu. Click on it and a little warning will open up explaining you what it does, but we'll ignore that because I'll explain this to you. What it allows you to do is set certain points in the past. So I'm going to set a point in April, and I can drag one roughly once every month. You can set up to 10 dots. But could be a bit more precise. I'm just doing it quickly and roughly. Now, after you set as many dots as you wish, you can hit the space bar on your keyboard, and ShareScope will pick a share at random from the list that you are viewing. So again, we're still looking at the FTSE 350 list. So it's picked a random share from a FTSE 350. It's hidden the name, and it's hidden all of the chart up to the very first dot that I have set up. You can now add all the various technical tools that you might want to use to analyze a share to see, is this share good, is this share bad? And you can then slowly begin revealing the share by hitting the space bar. You hit the space bar once and it will reveal the graph up to the second dot. You hit it again, it'll move on to the third dot, fourth dot, fifth, sixth, seventh. And when you hit it for the last time, it will show you the entire graph, and it'll also reveal what share you have picked. So again, and we can now see what share that was, and it will and yeah, if you hit the spacebar again, it will just pick a new share from the list of instruments. So you could, and the list of instruments can be, again, as always, any list you want. It could be the FTSE 350 or one of your portfolios, and you might, if you're very familiar with the charts, you might be able to zoom out and recognize the share by just looking at its historical price movement. But if you're anything like me, then you have no chance in recognizing a share just purely by a chunk of historical data. And you could then use this with whatever your favorite technical analysis technique. You're removing the fact that you can see the future, and so you can say, right, I want to buy this share and I'm going to pretend to have bought this share, and then you can instantly reveal and go forward in time and to several months in the future and see if your idea panned out or not. When you're done and you wish to disable it, actually before we do that, if you right click on the first mark here, you can clear all marks and you can just set them up again to where you want them. If you right click, then click again on training mode, and the training mode will be disabled, and you're now back to showing a normal list of shares. Right, we are 53 minutes into the webinar, and I have timed it a lot better than I normally do because I have now gone through the list of features that I want to show you. We've got a few minutes, so if you have any questions, I will be here to answer any questions you might have. So does a training mode with ShareScript use? Yes, if you add it will cut off everything, including ShareScript, up to the first dot. So if you add a ShareScript indicator on the graph, just like any other indicator. So let's add a normal indicator, and let's add a ShareScript indicator. If we turn on training mode, it's just going to chop everything up to that point in time. So you can then use that the scripts or any chart features you want to make your analysis and then check if you were right or not. Okay, sorry, I just saw, Richard, I posed an earlier question on the pie chart reference to market cap. Will it work on a list of international stock indices? Well, yeah, if you talk, when you say stock indices, if you're talking about, for example, the like the S&P 500 list of shares, then yes, as I said, it will work on any list that its constituents have a market capitalization value. So it doesn't have to be UK, but if I go to company sector analysis, it will work with US shares. It won't work if I pick something that does not have a market capitalization, like, I don't know, foreign exchange, for example, just to make a silly example, but no data to display because no items have a market capitalization. If there is a mixture, or say you pick up a portfolio and you have 3 or 4 items in that portfolio that don't have a market cap value, they will just be simply ignored from the company sector analysis. It will still, the company sector analysis will work. The items with no market cap will just be completely ignored. Right, if there are no more questions, I will terminate the webinar here. And thank you very much for listening. If you are interested in viewing the webinar again, I will try to edit it down and upload it on YouTube sometime tomorrow. And if for whatever reason I'm unable, then it will be on Tuesday. But normally I get it in on the Friday. In the meantime, thank you very much for tuning in this afternoon, and I will see you next time. Goodbye.